Hey guys, my name is Rodolphe Pierre-Louis, founder of ActionVFX.com. I've really been looking forward to this tutorial. Our Structure Fire collection is actually my favorite of our current collections, so I'm glad to finally be able to give everybody a closer look at some of the things you can do with it. So for this tutorial, we'll be taking this shot from my apartment, and we're going to burn the crap out of it. I'll be using After Effects for this tutorial, but all of those techniques should translate to other compositing software. As you'll see, most of the work is just overlaying different stock footage on top of each other, so it's actually not that advanced. So, alright, let's get to it. So I already created this composition and brought in our background footage of Luke laying on the stairs. We make him work so hard that he passes out sometimes. Poor guy. You can download this shot on our website, the link is in the description. As you can see, the footage is pretty flat since it was shot in log, which is why I have this grade layer here. It basically just contains a lot that helps me see the footage more like it'll look once graded. I'll leave this layer on while we work, but we can turn it off when it's time to render. The first thing we need to do is to track the shot, so we'll use the built-in After Effects 3D camera tracker. Automatically, it starts analyzing the shot. And it's done tracking. Now we're going to create a camera for our scene. So let's create a camera. This 3D camera matches the camera motion of the shot. So all we have to do now is start overlaying our fire stock footage. For the sake of time for this tutorial, I'll focus more on showing you how I burned the door, the ceiling, and the two walls in the back. Once you see how I added these, you'll know enough to easily do the other ones. Like I said earlier, this is just basic overlaying, so the stock assets pretty much do most of the work. First, let's do the door. Before I start, I'll need to have a reference point for the position of the door in 3D space. To do this, we'll just have to go back to our 3D camera tracker, and we're going to find a point that's close to our area. In this case, this one should do it. So we'll right click and create a null object, and I'll rename this door null. We'll first use one of our wall corner assets. It should be this one. We basically created these to show fire wrapping around different objects. So we'll be using it in this case to wrap the fire around the door frame. If you have these files already downloaded, it's called Wall Corner Fire 0155. So let's drag this in. I found that I like the look of these fires when they're slowed down a little bit. So let's go to our time settings. And we'll change this from 100 to 130. Since these fires were shot at 60 frames per second, it won't be choppy at all. The first thing we'll do is convert it to a 3D layer, then parent it to our door null. Then we'll change the positions to 0 so that the fire can be placed exactly where the null is in 3D space. We do need the fire to wrap the other way, so we'll need to change the scale from, well, this first part of the scale from 100 to -100, so it flips it horizontally. It's still a bit too small, so let's make it a little bit bigger. 158 did it for my shot. Now let's align the edge of the door frame with the edge of the fire. Let's go ahead and zoom in. So you can see the edge here, so we'll need to rotate it slightly. Now let's mask the bottom of it so it can actually look like it's behind the stairs. You don't always have to do this next part since the fires are already pre-keyed, but I do like to change the blend mode to screen when working with fire effects. I just prefer the look it gives. So this is what we have so far. Now let's burn the door. For this we'll use this ground wall ceiling front 0174 clip. As you can see, the fire is burning underground, crawls up a wall, and hits the ceiling. So this will be perfect for what we're doing. So we'll drag this in. We'll slow it down again to 130. And let's drag it down here so we can start at a later point since we don't actually want to see the fire starting. Parent it to the door now, change it to a 3D layer, and change the position to 0 so it can move back to the null like we did for the first one. We'll want to flip this as well, so we'll go to the scale and change this first one here from 100 to -100. Let's also increase the size. I think I used 181. So the goal here is to align the ceiling of our fire effect to the ceiling of our shot, so it looks like it's actually bouncing off that ceiling. So we'll move it. That should be good. And we'll change the blending mode from normal to screen as well. One thing I noticed was that the fire wasn't thick enough, at least not for this shot. So I added the curves effect to the layer. And I changed this from RGB to alpha. And I boosted the alpha channel a bit, which brought out more of the fire. Like the first effect, we'll also have to mask it behind the stairs. And now we have this. Now for the fun part, which is the ceiling. For this, I just used one of our ceiling fires, 0run78, which you can see here, and duplicated it a bunch of times. So let's get this into our scene. Slow it down. Let's slide the layer back a bit so that we don't actually get this as it's starting. But this is a good starting point. And we'll do the usual parenting to the door now, converting it to a 3D layer. And we'll set the position to 0 as well, so it can move back here. Now let's scale it up a bit to about 210. The angle for the ceiling fire works really great for our shot, so we'll just have to position it right where the fire meets the corner of the ceiling. So let's rotate it to align it better. And we'll set the blend mode to screen. The edge of the fire doesn't really work well for this shot though, so we'll just have to mask it out. And we'll set the feather to 33 pixels. Then we'll duplicate this fire layer, this ceiling layer, and we'll slide it to the side so it can cover the rest of this wall. Let's change the timing a little bit so it's not the exact, reflection of this one. Last thing will be just to mask, this, ceiling fire layer behind this wall. We'll duplicate it again, but this time we'll put it above the others so it can spread through the ceiling more. We'll actually delete this mask. And we'll just bring it a little bit higher. But right there is good. And we'll just create a completely new mask. For this one, we'll set the feather to about 100 pixels. We'll duplicate it again, and this time we're going to position it behind the door. As you can see, the door is slightly open, so we want to show the ceiling burning behind it. So let's make it happen. Let's temporarily hide the other layers so we can see better. And we'll need to remove this mask too. Rotate this a little bit and create a mask. And we'll set the feather to about 20 pixels. Now we're going to duplicate it again one last time. This time we'll be rotating it to fit the left corner of the wall. So let's remove that mask. And I just need to rotate this so it can match, the angle of this corner. And let's create a new mask so we can hide the edges. If you look too close now, it might look a little off, but since we're going to add a new fire layer in front of this wall anyways, it's going to blend right in. But before we do that, let's go ahead and create another null from a point from our wall. So we'll go back to this background layer and we'll need to select another point from the left wall. This one right here should work great. Like it matches and stays with this. So create null and we'll rename it to left wall. We'll be using another ground wall ceiling fire clip. This one is 0176. It's basically like the first one that we used, except this one has been shot from a side angle, so it'll fit nicely over a side wall. So let's drag this in and make it work. You already know all the steps by now, so we'll skip all that boring stuff. So I brought this in, I flipped it, slowed it down a bit, made sure, the ceiling, of the fire matched and touched the ceiling of my shot. And yeah, that's basically it. This is the result. And for the right side of the wall, we'll just duplicate this wall fire that we used for the door. We're gonna flip it and we'll use it for the wall. We do have a lot more options in the collection, so you don't have to keep duplicating things that much. I'm just doing that because I specifically wanted to do this tutorial with as few elements as possible. And so this is what we have so far. The biggest thing that the fires are missing right now is a glow. Right now they're just kind of there and they don't really look that bright. So let's fix that by adding a glow effect to them. To start, I'll just add it to one of the clips and then we'll copy it to the other ones. So we have our glow on this wall fire here. We'll go ahead and change the glow operation from add to screen. We'll change glow colors to AB colors. I just really prefer using A and B colors instead of the default one, because I feel like it usually gives more realistic results. At least personally, that's what I think. And we'll change the color looping to sawtooth, A greater than B. And we'll change the color to, what's this about, an orange, and just make it really just kind of desaturated, nothing too crazy. And let's go ahead and adjust the threshold, radius, and intensity. For the threshold, we'll put it down to 0 because we basically want all of the fire to be glowing. And the radius, we'll put it at 366. And the glow intensity, the setting I had it on was 2.1. So you can see this is looking pretty nice. So let's go ahead and copy this glow effect and I will just paste it to all of the other fire clips. So now these fires look a ton better than they did before. You can see some of the glow, lighting up the walls and stuff. So much more realistic. So now let's go ahead and add the burn mark textures. If the place is on fire, then of course the walls need to actually be burning. I had to think about the best way of creating these, and weirdly enough, the solution turned out to be pretty easy. So I went outside and found this oil stain on the ground. I pulled out my phone and took a picture of it, hoping that I could somehow, turn this into burn marks. And well, it ended up working pretty great. So let me show you how I did this. So let's drag this image to the shot. Going to parent it to our door. No, gonna create it, convert it to a 3D layer, and we'll put the positions at 0. Let's scale it up a bit. About 205 were pretty good. And let's move it around. And so far, it doesn't really look like much at all. But once I change the blending mode from normal to multiply, if I could find it, you can see that it darkens a lot and automatically it starts looking more like what we're going for. So let's mask the areas, like only the areas that we actually wanted. So where the fire is, we start about right here. And we'll go ahead and feather it. I would say about 250. Yeah. And we also need to mask out this wall so it can be behind it. So this is what it looks like now. If you knew that the burn marks were just oiled up concrete, then maybe you'd be able to tell. But if not, it just looks like walls are burning. The last thing I'll go over in this tutorial is adding a flare in the scene. After all, if there's that much fire in the shot, there's bound to be a bigger glow in the room. Now, there are many ways to add the flare, but for this, we'll be doing a much more basic version. Let's create a new solid. And I've already had the color selected. It's basically like a very light, pale orange. And we'll drag it under our grade layer. Then we use the ellipse tool to create a circle mask. We'll change the blending mode from normal to screen. And we'll do the usual, like parent it to the doorknob, convert it to a 3D layer, change the positions to 0. Scale it up. And we'll position it right over the flames. Then we'll go ahead and add a blur. And we'll blur it a ton. I think I was about 700 when I did it. Now we just need to mess around with the opacity of this layer. Yeah, about 52. About 52 should do it. So this is, how it was before. And that's how it is after. So you can see it just looks a lot better having that glow here. To better match the color temperature of the room to the fire, we'll select our background plate and we'll go ahead and add a curves effect to it. I'll change this to the blue channel, lower it a little bit, and then lower the green channel a bit. So that pretty much just warms up the scene really nicely. I didn't do this next step earlier because it would have slowed things down a bit. So now that we're done with this tutorial, let's add it. Basically, since all of these fire effects were shot at a high shutter speed, it's good to add a force motion blur effect on there to give it the appearance of a more normal shutter speed. So let's go ahead and select this. And we can select all our fire layers. And we can just add it. So as you can see, you can kind of see, the motion blur going on here. It just gives like a more, realistic look, especially if, you filmed your footage at regular shutter speeds. And there you go. Obviously, there are a lot of little things you can still add to improve the shot, like adding a flicker, smoke, embers. But for this tutorial, my main goal was to show you how you can add the fires to your shot and make them fit in. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on it, so go ahead and leave a comment below. If you have any suggestions for other tutorials, be sure to let us know that as well. Our goal at ActionVFX is to create the best stock assets for realistic visual effects. So check us out at actionvfx.com to see all our collections. Thank you.